Hi, my name's Thomas J. West, and this is the first in a series of videos designed to help people who know the basics of music notation learn more about music theory so that they can then apply that to writing their own music. These videos assume that you already know the basics of music notation, things like rhythms, whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, time signatures like 4/4 and 3/4, being able to read the treble clef and bass clef, and that you have some kind of performing experience on either an instrument or as a singer. With all those basics in place, these videos are going to help you take that knowledge and apply it to music theory and then to composing. So I hope you find them helpful. Okay, so I'm using a software program called Finale to demonstrate this to you today, and I'm also using a MIDI keyboard to play the notes in. If you're not familiar with the piano keyboard, I highly recommend that you learn where the notes are on the keyboard because it really is the primary tool for any composer, whether it's your primary instrument or not. So I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard to play in middle C, which is right there. Middle C is C4. It's the fourth C up on the keyboard, and which octave you're composing in becomes important later on. Okay, so right now I'm just playing the notes of a C major scale. So that's C followed by D followed by E, F, G, A, B, and then C on the top. Major scales really are composed of 7 pitches, with the 8th pitch being a repeat of the first one an octave higher. Okay, in those notes there are 2 places naturally in the major scale. There are 2 places where a half step occurs between pitches instead of a whole step. All of these pitches are a whole step apart, with the exception of when we get to E to F. Those 2 pitches are only a half step apart. They're the spots on the piano keyboard where there's a black key missing. You have that set of 2 black keys and a set of 3. And if I pull my camera down here real quick, I can show you. Here's the middle C. Whoops. There we go. Here's the middle C. Here's E. Here's F. There's no black key there because these 2 pitches are a half step apart. Okay. Same thing happens up here with B and C. Okay, so right here we have B and C. Those steps of the scale, step 3 and step 4 and step 7 and 8, are always in a major scale a half step apart. Okay, now if I write this same scale in bass clef, that C is going to be down here. And if I play up my keyboard from there, I have the C, D, okay. Now this C back here that I started this scale on is C3. It's the 3rd octave up on the piano. And then that I ended on, it's the same pitch as the C4 that I started on. It's just written in bass clef instead of treble clef. Okay, so major scales are a collection of 7 pitches with the 8th pitch repeating, where the pitches are arranged in whole step and half steps. The half steps occur between scale degrees 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Now this applies when we start to look at scales that start on a different starting pitch. So for C major scale, the half steps line up with the locations of the half steps that are naturally occurring on the keyboard. E and F, no matter what key you're in, are always a half step apart. B and C are always a half step apart. When you have a C major scale, those half steps happen to line up with the locations in a major scale where a half step is supposed to be. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the key of D. All right. So I'm going to go back up here to treble clef. I'm going to play a D there. And now I'm going to play up. I'm going to stick to the white keys for the moment, and I'm going to play up from there. So we got D, E, F, G. Oh, I skipped over A. Backing up. Okay, so if I scroll down there so you can see that, if I were just starting from starting from the D part, which is going to be measure 5. Let's see. Here we go. If I start playing from 5, you'll hear, hopefully. It doesn't sound quite right. That's because the half step between 3 and 4 is not between 3 and 4. That E to F is between 2 and 3. So in order for this to sound like a regular major scale, this F has to be F sharp. Sharps, hopefully by now you know, raise a pitch a half step. So now F sharp to G, this is where our 3 to 4 step of the scale is located. So we've got F sharp and we've got G. And then down here, in order to get the half step between step 7 and 8, we need C to be C sharp. And so now we have C sharp and D. Right? So again, if I play from measure 5, now with those half steps in the correct place, this is what it sounds like. That's a D major scale. Okay. Another thing to be said about scales is that scales can be played ascending or descending. So I'm going to play the D scale going down. Now there it has enharmonic. There we go. Okay, so if I go back and start from measure 5 again, now you're going to hear an ascending D major scale and a descending D major scale. Okay, so that is in order for the scale starting on the pitch D to sound like a major scale, the half steps have to be located between steps 3 and 4 and steps 7 and 8 of the scale, which in this case involve putting some sharps in there. Now let's show you a scale that uses flats. Okay, I'm going to go to bass clef here since I just did one in treble clef, and I'm going to start on this low F down here. Okay, so this is going to be an F major scale. If I play the F major scale as written just on the white keys, it's going to sound like this. Okay, now that F major scale, if I start there, that's measure 8. So let me play that from there. Okay, so it's actually measure 9. But you can hear that the half steps aren't in the right place. Now in this case, step 3 and 4 is supposed to be a half step here, but we've got an A going to a B, which is a whole step. So in this case, instead of raising the A to A sharp, because that would make the G to the A interval too large, I'm actually lowering the B to B flat. And that means that A to B flat is a half step. And it also means that the B flat to C is now a whole step, because B and C were a half step apart before. Okay. Now here at the top of the scale, we have E is step 7, F is step 8. Those two pitches are already a half step apart, so that happens to line up with where the half step is supposed to occur. So now if I begin here in measure 9 to play, you're going to hear the correct F major scale. Okay, so that is F major scale starting on F2. It's the bottom of the bass clef going to F3. Okay, so all the major scales have the same pattern of whole steps and half steps. The half steps occur between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, and you can start on any pitch, and then depending on which pitch you start on, that determines which sharps or flats you need in the key signature in order to have the half steps and whole steps in the correct places. There are 12 major scales. There are 12 half steps that are possible to start on, and each of those half steps has its own major scale setup. You can have the C major scale, which has no sharps or flats, all the way up to the F sharp major scale and the C sharp major scale. C sharp major scale has sharps on all 7 pitches. You can have flats up to the D flat major scale, and then the G flat major scale, where you have lots of flats in the key signature. Okay, depending on who you're writing for and what kind of instruments you're writing for, or voices, some of those keys are more friendly for writing in on those instruments than others. Generally speaking, for singers, it doesn't matter that much. You just give them a starting pitch and they can sing in any key. For string instruments like violins and cellos, they tend to like the sharp keys a little bit better because they're the ones that lay on the instrument well, and they're the ones that they tend to learn first. For the band instruments like flutes, saxophones, clarinets, trumpets, they tend to like the flat keys first because a lot of those instruments are transposed into flat keys, which is a whole nother topic that we could discuss at some other time. The major scale is the key element. It is the building block by which all music theory is based on. Everything comes from the major scale, whether it's minor keys, other modes, chords, chord progressions, melody lines, all of it is generated from the major scale. So before you can move forward with being able to compose anything, you need to get familiar with major scales. You don't necessarily have to memorize all the key signatures, but as you work with them, you're just going to start remembering them. In the next video that I'm going to show you, I will show you the basics of arpeggios and building chords. So hope that that is helpful to you. I hope you found that video to be helpful to you, and I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube page up here in the corner so that you can get the next video as I keep making these in this series of music theory and music composition videos. If you would like more one-on-one help from me, I do teach private lessons. Click this link up here, and that'll take you to a page where you can look at my online profile. I've been teaching webcam lessons since 2008 and would love to help you in person with all of the things that you're doing. Also, if you'd like to support my composing efforts, click down here and visit my Patreon page. Every time I publish a new piece of music, my patrons chip in a little money and help me to promote and get my music out there. So thank you very much for watching my video, and I hope you tune in to the next one.